Welcome back to RGR Craft. We are looking forward to this show because we have to talk about something that's really important. It is how you get your grain into your beer. And if you haven't seen us before, this is what we do. I'm Ryan Tracy, and this is Mike Munhall. How are you, Mike?
I am just fine, Ryan. How are you doing?
I'm trying to make sure that I cover all the bases here because my mill has recently repaired, so it's been a bit. But we're going to get into the details today about how we go about our systems, how we work with our grind. We're going to have a beer as well. If you're new to the channel, make sure you like and sub and hit the bell notification because that'll let you know when we do something else. If you missed our last one, we did a beer review of that great hazy IPA. And yes, I said great. Ghost in the Machine from Parish Brewing. So go check that out as well. And if you like Grainfather or Pico Brew or the Spike series, those are all equipment variables that we use, and you can find videos on this channel for them. So my first question to you, Mike, what are you drinking today?
Oh, that's funny that you asked that because that is the exact same question I wanted to ask of you. Yeah, so we've been liking Spencer Brewery recently, right? So I'm going to be drinking their Peach Saison.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I have not had that one yet. It is on my list, but I haven't got there because I'm not a big peach guy.
I'm not a big peach guy or a Saison guy. Actually, I do like Saisons. I don't go out of my way for them, but you stepping out of my wheelhouse a little bit. So yeah, tell me what are you drinking?
I'm back to the one. In fact, folks, you can find a review of this beer from me in depth a little while ago because I'm a sucker for this beer. This is Sublimely Self-Righteous Black IPA. This is the one that kind of got me back into brewing. And thanks to Mike, who helped me actually accomplish that goal without killing myself. It was close there for a bit, but
it's not that we didn't try.
No, yeah, we gave it a good college try, right? But I mean, this is like black nectar is what this is. And it's funny because they haven't made it in a while, so I bought a ton of it. And I'm going to be drinking it for a while. So cheers to you and to the viewers. Nice to see you guys. So how do you feel about that color right there?
Well, that looks like a Saison. No, that's nice. It's I would say that is a very nice orange grapefruit color. Yeah, that aroma is nice. There's a little bit of peach in there. I think there's a little bit of maybe some sourness going on. That's a really nice aroma. That's very pleasant.
It's not like you don't like any Belgian that you ever met. So I guess that's
kind of true. I know that's a problem, but yeah, tell me what you think about yours, the aroma, then we'll start drinking this.
It's classic. I mean, it gives you that classic C hop kind of top end. I don't know what's in here. I'd like to know, to tell you the truth, but the roast, it's like the perfect culmination. And I know that hazy IPAs are big, right? The brewed IPAs are gone. Nobody drinks them anymore, evidently. Black IPAs are almost dead too, but I'm the one keeping this alive right here. Roast and hops. I like it. And the funny thing about this versus you can make this like a standard IPA with some roasted malt and you're going to be fine. But that beer that you have, the Saison, when I make Saison, and I make it a lot because it's my wife's favorite style. The thing for me is I have always had a little bit of trouble getting my efficiency out of it because it is a pretty straightforward grist, right? You're talking about Pilsner, maybe a little bit of wheat. It depends on who's making it, right? So like I've always tried to maximize what I get sugar-wise out of that. And so it has led me to go to this point now where I have my own grain mill, and folks, you'll probably see some B-roll of my mill here because I had to rebuild it twice. I'm a little rough on them, evidently. And it's about that grind that really gets you that maximum efficiency. And I'm not one, I know you're not one to chase efficiency just for the sake of efficiency, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. This is going to be interesting. I think you and I are going to end up on opposite ends of the spectrum on this one.
It's perfectly fine.
I have some lightly held opinions on how to mill grains and the pros and cons. And you know what, the overall benefit of milling at a particular size. Right. So anyway, we're going to get into that, but you you right now, you mill your own grains.
I do.
And I don't. I rely on my local homebrew store.
And that's perfectly fine because
It is.
it's the same process, right? I'm guessing you make a trip to the store, what, the day before brew day, 2-3 days, or how far out do you go?
Usually 2 or 3 days, so I can make a starter if I need one. But yeah, it's within 1 to 3 days usually.
Well, and that's the problem for me, as you well know, and the viewers might not know, is I'm an hour away from my local homebrew store.
Right.
And unfortunately, you know, with the contracting of the industry over the last year, I've lost 2 that were closer than my preferred. And now a lot of what I do is mail order. So that's what sparked me to just get my mill, go from there. I've modified it a little bit to help with me, because I do have a tendency to go, like we talked in our last show. I do like the higher ABVs. If I'm going to make a beer, I'm not looking for a sessionable beer. If I'm going to spend that brew day and those hours away from my family, I'm going to get something out of it, and it's going to be a prime number ABV. So that said, for me, it's kind of a journey back and forth between the 2 systems. And for those of you that are new to the channel, Mike runs on a Grainfather. I run on an open classic 2 kettle system or my Pico Brew. And the 2 of them are very, very different. And quite frankly, they're very different in the way that they handle the grist itself. For me, I go out of my way to make sure that I'm matching what I'm doing per system. Have you found a difference in going from your old open 3-vessel system to your Grainfather?
Oh, I'm sure there's a lot of differences. I've never really thought about it that much. And this is where I think you and I are going to disagree, Ryan. I don't think it's that much different, right? It's not so much that it's I don't know. You can talk all sorts of stuff, like, you know, maybe the shape of your mash tun, you know, makes a difference, right? Like, especially if you're recirculating your mash and you're trying not to compact it, right? So of course the shape is going to make a difference there, you know, but you know, the size of your crush, you know, if you're going to do a really fine crush or a really coarse crush on your grain, is going to make a difference. Where I have to stop short of saying all of this matters is, we're in a homebrew system, right? We're making 5 gallons of beers, not 5 barrels. And I think at the homebrew level, it doesn't as matter quite as much as it would if you're going to be scaling up to a larger system.
Sure.
I mean, that said, there still are variables to talk about. But, you know, if you're asking, like, did I notice a difference between my 3-vessel system towards my, you know, against my 1-vessel system with Grainfather? Not really. I really haven't. You know, it's, I mean, there's things that I'm careful of. There's things that I'm cautious of. You know, it's like, I don't want to get a stuck mash by milling my grains too fine.
Right.
You know, especially now that I'm recirculating my mash, that matters, right? Because I'm compacting that stuff as I'm recirculating, right? So that is a factor. But that said, I just haven't run into any problems on my old system or my new system that I've had to worry about. But it's not to say I'm not thinking about them either.
And it's funny that you put it that way, because I'm the total opposite. I've done it all. I have ground too thick and not gotten my extraction, where I'm aiming for 8% and I get 6. And I've run a stuck mash through what is a really, really robust system that I built myself in order to not have a stuck mash. So
right.
For me, it's the open vessel system is way more robust for me. I'm petrified of getting a stuck mash in the Pico Brew because it's such a closed circuit system.
Yeah.
So I am overly cautious with that. But the main compensation for me is when I'm not hitting my target or whatever. And I'm over analytical. I take more readings probably than I should, just for my own sanity. But in the Pico, you don't have that ability to just compensate by throwing more grain in. Whereas on an open system, I think you can always do that. And like you said, for a 5-gallon batch, a home brew scale, a couple hands full of grain can fix your problem. You don't have to worry about the grind anymore, right?
Sure. Sure. Well, I mean, here's my philosophy on this, right? Find a crush that works for you and roll with that. I'm more about, at this point, at this scale, I want to just be able to calculate my efficiency before I brew. I want to know what I'm heading into. So my homebrew store is really good about maintaining their, the width between those rollers. So every time I go there, I'm getting a consistent crush. That's good enough for me, right? Um, I don't have to have my own mill and maintain that myself. I know that what I'm going to get out of my homebrew store is consistent. That's what's important to me, right? Of course, I don't want to mill my grains into a powder and get a stuck mash. I don't want it so coarse that I'm not getting, the efficiency that I want out of it. I want consistency. And that's what matters to me. It's like, so when we talk about milling our grains, there's a lot of variables in there with, of course, a finer, when you mill too fine, you risk a stuck mash. If it's too coarse, then your efficiency theoretically goes down. But in practice, I have not seen either of those two things happen at this scale.
Well, you also have a bit of an advantage. I think it's Homebrew Store of the Year in 2020. So, let's give them a shout out. Who do you go to?
Oh, the Brew Hut in Aurora, Colorado.
There's a certain advantage to going to Brew Hut, okay? Because I live an hour and 45 minutes from there, and sometimes I go to Brew Hut for that.
Right.
Because when, especially coffee malt, I can't get it a lot of times. Because it's just not in stock in some of the suppliers that I use to get it to my house. So I have to go all the way down and over and through the woods and grandma's house and all. But that is an advantage, because if you have a homebrew store by you that actually maintains that and is strict about it and can keep that crush consistent, that's what Mike gets, and he doesn't have to worry about it like I do.
Right. Exactly.
Whereas me,
I don't have to worry about it.
I'm sacrificing a credit card every other time. So just to make sure that I have my grist right.
So yeah, you have a really good legitimate reason for having a mill and controlling your crush at your home, right? You're out in the boonies. And anybody, like, even if you you don't have to be out in the boonies to take advantage of that, right? Some people buy sacks of grain just to save money, right? And buy in bulk. Yep. And so, yeah, mill your own grains. So, if you can provide the consistency in your crush in your own home, good on you. Go for it. I don't want to have the extra equipment. I'd rather just, crush my grains when I go buy them. And so that's fine with me. That works just fine. But so circling back around, Ryan, we talked about what happens if you crush too fine or too coarse. I think there's a good reason to try to avoid a stuck mash, right? Don't grind too thin, I like I said earlier, I have not really, at this scale, experienced a difference in efficiency, between my grinds. It just hasn't happened. And I'm not sure if it's just because it's a myth, or it's just we're at a small enough scale that it doesn't matter. But if I'm going to grind more coarse than normal, it's just to prevent a stuck mash. It's with large grain bills in a kind of a more vertical and kind of a thinner mash vessel where I'm recirculating, where there's a chance of that compacting. Mm-hmm. That's when I'll take into consideration the crush size, and I'll go a little bit more coarse if I had the option that I would a finer crush.
That makes perfect sense. I've experimented all over the place, so that all the way down to nearly flour. And I will tell you this, if you're some experienced homebrewers don't even know this, keep rice hulls on hand, no matter what. Because however you feel, if you're getting more flour out of that grind, whether you did it at a store or you did it at home, if it doesn't feel right to you, use the rice hulls. There's no reason not to. It doesn't affect your mash, especially for if you have a 10-gallon system that you can get all that volume in, you might as well use it and take advantage of it. That's what I do. Sure. And there's been a crush where I meant to do it on the Pico, and either the mill slipped out of place, which generally leads to a larger crush rather than narrow. But I just wasn't happy with it, and I didn't feel confident that the Pico would handle it, so I had to switch over. And that brew day, I had to go back to the 3 vessel and go outside.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's worth explaining to anybody that doesn't know what we're talking about. We're talking about using rice hulls to break up or make it easier to liquid to flow through your mash. Right. It has the same effect as a coarser grind. But yes, rice hulls, I keep some on hand for that very reason, right? When I have a large grain bill and that grain father, like I said, that's tall and thin, and I want to ensure that I'm not going to compact that grain, I will absolutely add rice hulls. That's I don't want to call it a trick. I think it's too common to call it a trick. That's just a technique that everybody needs to understand.
Yeah, and it's useful. It'll save you, because I've gone through multiple false bottoms, because I like to use a false bottom, and I use a Bayou Classic in my main mash tun because I use an induction burner to keep the temperature, and I recirculate as well. So even though you're in a single vessel, I'm recirculating in my second vessel for the same concept, right? And in that process, it just takes away that ability for it all to form one cone that then gets sucked through and can crush. Especially the Bayou Classic false bottoms are not that robust. There are some third-party ones that I suggest. In fact, I'll probably link those up in the description for you guys. Because it's not pretty. At the end of the day, when you get a stuck mash, what I end up having to do is go back and take, change my mill again, widen it out, get a really coarse one, then add more grain, mix it all in so you get some dispersion there, and then you can usually get it going again. There's also a technique where folks say, let it mash at whatever temperature it's sitting at for an hour or two, and let that grain kind of break down a little bit more, try to absorb some of the fluff that you get out of the kernels once they open. I don't know that I trust that myself. So
yeah, well,
it is what it is.
So let's talk about some other effects of a coarse grind versus a really fine grind, right? So I know you're pretty religious about taking readings, like pH readings on your mash throughout the mash, right? So have you found, I know that there should be an effect on pH, theoretically, again, there should be an effect on pH with a really fine grind versus a really coarse grind. Yeah. Have you done any testing on that? Have you seen any difference?
Not testing like side by side, but I do the different grain size of the crush. I have documented it all, and there is a difference, especially when you get to the point where when the pH either drops too low or doesn't get low enough because of those grains, depending on what grain you're using. Obviously, with the darker malt, you're going to get more pH drop. But once you fall out of that 5.2 to 5.6 range, you lose efficiency. You can make the same beer, and the size of that crush will drastically affect the ABV and the extraction that you get in terms of the sugars. So it is important. And like you said earlier, that kind of middle ground takes care of everything. If you have a credit card, get it in there in a mill and set it to that size, and you're going to be okay.
Yeah. And I haven't done any testing, so I can't say one way or another. But again, at this scale, the pH is important. That is really important. But the very limited reading I've done on Google, on this subject, at this scale, again, it just doesn't. I haven't read a lot that it's the pH is affected that much. I'm interested in knowing, like, really what happens at this scale. We're talking about 5 gallons, not 5.
Well, I'll tell you. I am more than happy to tell you, because I make triple all the time, as you know. And whether it's triple or saison, the ABV isn't that different in my house. So it doesn't make a whole lot of difference. But the difference in the crush, the two differences equate to me with the same water volume. And honestly, I'm on well water, so it's a little bit different for most folks.
Yeah.
But it drops anywhere from 5.4 all the way down to 4.4. And that is well out of the range where you lose all kinds of efficiency once you get down there. So it does play a factor for me, especially maybe on city water. It doesn't make that much of a difference because of the ions that are in there. But, brewing water is another topic that we'll talk some other day,
Right.
folks.
Yeah.
I will suggest to you this, go to Ward. Ward has helped me a ton with my brewing. So there's a lot to it. But that said, the medium is what you want to maintain. And as long as you hit that medium and you can maintain it brew to brew to brew, I think that then you adjust to your system and you get the results that you want by trial and error, unfortunately, but it's just more beer to drink in between.
Right. Here's another variable to consider, right? Actually, this is less of a variable and just something to try to avoid, is extracting tannins from your grains from, again, a too fine of a crush, right? But here, man, I'm going to say the same thing again. At this scale, I just have not experienced that, right?
You're not trying hard enough.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe not. I mean, of course, I have the luxury of having a homebrew store that maintains their mills, like we said, so I don't have to worry about it. But it doesn't mean that I haven't, in the past, acquired grains or milled grains that were too fine, but I just have not experienced that tannin extraction either. But that is something to consider. I just question whether or not it's something we're going to experience at this small scale. But it is something to talk about and something to consider, because you have to be aware of that, right? If you're consistently milling your grains very fine, you may end up experiencing that.
Well, and for someone who's been all over the spectrum, I can vouch for it. And it seems to be an inverse of grain size to time. And I'm someone that does longer mashes. I do step mashes on everything. I find that my beer comes out better when I do that. We can have the whole argument about single temperature versus steps, and we'll do that some other day. But in the end, the longer time, I find when I mill too fine, I do get that extraction, because my mashes on total are somewhere between 90 minutes and 105 minutes generally.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that is a difference. I mean, my mashes are 60 or 90 minutes. No, actually, you know what? That's not true. My boils are 60 or 90 minutes. My mashes are consistently 45 to 60 minutes, and that's it. I don't overthink it. A 60-minute mash is going to be just as good as a 90-minute mash for me for the beers that I make. But you're right. That is a good point, right? So if your mash times are longer, that absolutely could be a factor in what you're extracting into your wort out of that, out of your grains, whether they're coarsely or finely milled.
Yeah. And for me, it's just a personal preference. Again, with the steps, you end up where I want to hit each of those pockets to make sure the enzymes do what they're doing, get everything that I can out of it, not just sugar wise, but flavor wise as well, because you can tell me all kinds of sensory testing, but I feel like the more that you get out of the grain itself, X, Y, or Z sugar molecule or anything else, you're getting more of what that grain was. And so for me, I want to make sure that I hit that at all the steps. But over extraction is a problem. Astringency is a problem if you're too fine. So again, err on the side of caution and go with the middle ground. I think that's probably the best advice that we can give.
Yeah. My advice would be find a crush that works for you and stick with it, right? Try to be consistent. Learn that crush and try to be able to calculate your efficiency and be able to calculate the other parameters of your beers. If you need to make adjustments from there, a finer crush or a more coarse crush, that's fine. But start in the middle of the road and adjust from there.
Yeah, I would agree.
So Ryan, totally different subject. What do you think of that beer?
I think that it's tasting just wonderful.
Yeah. This is I like the Spencer Peach Saison. If you like peach and if you like Saison, this would be a beer that you like.
Are you getting more Saison or more peach out of it is my question.
It's pretty much half and half.
Yeah. Okay. That's
good. It's not overpowering on either side, which is actually what I like.
Everybody's had my thoughts on this beer from the review from a couple of weeks ago, so I'm pretty good. But it is one that makes me continually happy.
Good.
So with that said, folks, we hope that you enjoyed this in our version of what grist mills do, how they need to be set up, and how they affect your beer. We appreciate you spending the time with us. Make sure you like and sub and hit the bell notification, because we have more coming for you. Beers reviewed and built from both of us. We'll probably start sharing some recipes here pretty quickly, and then we might even have to do spirits pretty soon.
Ooh, that would be fun.
I know, right? Hey, a whole different concept. But Mike, thanks for all the time tonight, and this is fun doing it.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks, Ryan.
Folks, thank you for your time. Have a great night. We'll talk to you next time.
Cheers. Be good.